Well, the last 24 hours has been a whirlwind when it comes to news around E3 and around Nintendo and around gaming in general, because a huge bomb just dropped last night that apparently Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft will all be skipping E3 this year. This is very massive news with huge implications, and I think I speak for most of us when I say it's extremely disappointing, especially those of us who are huge Nintendo fans. Now, for those of you who know me, you know that not only am I a massive Nintendo fan, and of course this channel is really dedicated to me mostly talking about Nintendo, but I am also a huge fan of the PlayStation and the Xbox. I have a PS5 and an Xbox Series X, and I truly am an equal opportunity gamer, and I play on all three platforms when there's games to play. I'm looking at you, Xbox. And I really love them all, and I definitely try to play a wide breadth of content in the industry. I'm a Nintendo fan first and foremost, but I'm also just a gaming fan, and I think it's very important for me, just for myself, to enjoy and support all of the different kinds of content that's out there, not just one platform's games. Now, I'm also an older gamer, as a lot of you guys know. I'm older than I think a lot of people assume or sometimes know. I'm in my early 40s, which means I've been experiencing the glory of E3 going back decades, including the golden years when it was a secret behind-the-scenes show and no one knew anything about it until we read the magazines that covered E3 the month after E3 happened, you guys. I'm talking pre-internet, before they were live streaming the press conferences and all of that fun stuff. There would be a lot of speculation. E3 would happen, and it would be this kind of secret mecca of like video game awesomeness that all of us on the outside had to just dream about. And again, we would literally have to wait an entire month after E3 happened to read all of the different video game physical magazines coverage of what happened at the show. And it was an extremely fun and exciting time. Yeah, it's awesome we get all of our news at our fingertips within a second of it dropping, but I'm telling you, there was a lot of magic about how it used to happen back in the day. And as an old man like myself, yes, I get nostalgic about the clunkier analog days of covering and getting excited about E3 back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And so that just brings us back to the news that we're covering today, which is that IGN reported last night that apparently, like I said, the big three, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, won't be at E3 this year. And that's big for a few reasons. One is because E3, of course, did not happen last year, and it did not happen almost 4 years ago, I guess. And also because it's the first time that it's returning to an in-person show, right? Because we all know the pandemic ground everything to a halt, and it didn't happen in 2020, and then it did happen again in 2021, all digital, then it didn't happen last year in 2022, and now this year was going to be the first time in 4 years that it was coming back to the convention center in person with live demos and people walking around show floors and playing games and seeing conferences, and obviously the business meetings would also be happening because that's part of what the E3 trade show is. Yes, it's a show floor for people, but it's also where business meetings are happening with all these different companies and all of the different back rooms and whatnot. And so all of that stuff was returning this year, which was extremely exciting. And until yesterday, we assumed that the biggest console manufacturers would also be there. But we now know that that's apparently just not the case. Now, it is worth noting that Microsoft is still going to be having their sort of standard show in LA that happens, I think, like pretty close to the convention center where E3 happens. They've done this in the past few years as well. It's going to happen, I think, over that same weekend. And I think that Phil Spencer has talked about loving and respecting E3, and he knows that it's valuable. IGN's article covers this, by the way, that I'll link below. And, you know, so there's a lot of talk about if E3 attendees might actually be able to attend Microsoft's show, and maybe it's going to sort of be like a pseudo offshoot of E3 without being branded as E3. And so that's cool. It's great to know that Microsoft is still doing something because their solitary show for Xbox will still be happening that weekend. So that's great news. We at least know we can count on Xbox news, and I'm very excited for that because, you know, I don't play my Xbox right now because there's really nothing to play, but I like Xbox, and I'm waiting for games to play. I'm super excited for Redfall and Starfield, for example. But outside of that, without Sony and Nintendo coming, it's extremely disappointing. And now, Sony, I think it was 2019. 2019 was either the last year Sony was there, or it was the first year they weren't there, which I think it was the first year that they weren't there. but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, it's been since around 2019, 2018, since Sony themselves has been a part of E3, which has been very, very sad. And now we just know that even Nintendo is not going to be there. And for those of us who are Nintendo fans, looking forward to information about their biggest games for the rest of 2023, maybe we would get hardware news, maybe we would see Metroid Prime 4 or some other big game. A new Mario game has been rumored for a while, Donkey Kong. You know, maybe they would confirm DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, because Tears of the Kingdom is going to release only a month before E3 is supposed to happen. You know, just seeing an E3 Nintendo Direct is an exciting thing, and we were all hoping that that was going to happen this year, as well as the show floor for people to play their games. But that's not happening. The show floor is apparently going to be just a bunch of third-party companies, and Ubisoft will be there, and EA, and Activision probably, and all of these multi-platform third-party games will probably be shown, but it's not going to be a great in-person event, and in theory, we probably won't be getting any Nintendo news that weekend. Now, I've mentioned it before, and I love to bring it up whenever E3 comes up, because it's also just one of my favorite memories as a gamer ever, but I did attend E3 in 2004, which is that golden era. It is the era where you weren't buying tickets as fans, you could only get in if you had industry connections, and myself, my girlfriend at the time, and our roommate at the time did get to go for reasons that are just too complicated to get into in a video. But it was amazing. You know, we had to walk around with like a freaking little disposable camera. We had no smartphones. We had no digital cameras like that. We had a disposable camera, and we got film developed like a week after we got back from LA, right? That's how we did it. And it was amazing. Metroid Prime 2 was there, Halo 2 was there behind closed doors, Metal Gear Solid 3, The First God of War, Star Fox Assault, Beautiful Joe, Killer 7, StarCraft Ghost, Resident Evil 4, the list goes on and on. It was just amazing. And having been to an E3 in person, I can confirm to you what the companies have said about putting on an E3 show. It is damned expensive because E3 is almost like an insane laser light show filled club rave of chaos. There are so many screens, there are so many employees working the booths, you got girls dancing all over the place, you got people hosting all of the game demos, you got people putting on press conferences, the convention center staff serving food and doing everything. So many consoles and pieces of hardware that have to be strewn about the entire freaking show floor. And the show floor is massive. And so when we think about why we hear that all three companies are not going to be there, I think that we know that in the digital age, we've just learned when you consider the millions upon millions of dollars Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft have to put up just to do one of these shows, I think the digital age has sadly shown these companies that you can save so much money by doing direct messaging in a different way because we're all getting our information via the internet now. The show floor only truly benefits the people who actually attend the show. It's not really benefiting those of us who are consuming the informations of E3 week, the information, I should say, of E3 week. And so it just probably comes down to the bottom line, man. Save a dollar, make a dollar. And so in the internet age, it's a sad fact, man, because I like living in the internet age, but it's also depressing because it kills things like this. But in the internet age, something like E3 just probably doesn't make sense monetarily. And so why wouldn't these companies elect to save millions of dollars and put on their own shows and get their information out independent from E3 and just make more money that way and save money on the production of E3? I hate to understand it, but I do understand it. I still think there is a different level of goodwill you get by putting on E3 and attending E3, and knowing that there are a lot of people who can cover these new games from having hands-on experience, both fans and YouTubers and the press alike, there is value to that for sure. There is marketing value, but I think that it still comes down to when all of these companies just crunch the numbers, I'm sure that there's still just more value to saving money on not attending and not putting up these huge fancy booths for just one weekend. Now, to wrap up this sad news about what's going on with E3, it is kind of fortunate that I had a reason to wait quite a while before I could actually make this video because something interesting came out and it was covered by VGC. And here is what they say about Nintendo's decisions to skip E3. According to VGC's publishing sources with knowledge of Nintendo's plans, take that for what you will, the company has decided to skip E3 2023, the event's first physical show in 4 years, because it feels it has fewer major releases than usual ready to show, and which would justify significant event space. So this is a pretty big potential piece of news. It's just a source. It's not like a confirmed thing. And it doesn't tell us everything in the world, but it obviously implies a couple of things that I think are worth noting. One is it's obviously doubling down on what I was just saying about how much money it takes to host a booth at E3. The amount of money Nintendo puts on to have a huge event space, they need a ton of content and a ton of things to get people excited and playing their content and talking about it and reviewing their content at E3, right? And so it's like if they don't have enough to show, they don't have enough to justify the money spent on the event space, right? But it also kind of shows and doubles down on some of the theories I've been talking to you guys about for a while now, and including very recently as well, which is after Tears of the Kingdom, the rest of their year might be fairly barren, right? And I've said this for a while. Pikmin 4 is the only game we truly know about to release after Tears of the Kingdom, and it's a significant game, especially for me as a huge fan. I think that game has a chance at being like a 10 out of 10 just for my own personal tastes. I think it's going to be like a decent-sized hit for the Pikmin franchise, but it's not a system seller. It's not even necessarily a holiday tentpole kind of game, although there's a chance Nintendo might be making it that. And so, in theory, because we didn't know much about the back half of the year after Zelda, a lot of us also thought E3 made sense not just because it was returning this year, but because we needed to learn more about what Nintendo was going to be doing the back half of the year after their big Zelda Tears of the Kingdom game. And if they aren't going to be at E3, so they're not going to give us messaging about the back half of the year, and if this is true, what VGC is saying, that they don't even have a lot of games to show for the back half of the year, that just means they don't have a lot of games, period, for 2023. And what does that possibly mean? Well, nothing is for sure. Everyone, we're all just having fun speculating like I've been doing for 3 years, but it kind of feels like maybe they're just opening up the space to allow for marketing and the reveal of new hardware. Now, this becomes a whole big can of worms and a much larger topic that, for me to truly dive into as somebody who's been talking about this for so long, it really deserves its own separate video. So I'm only going to touch on it here. I'm not really going to go too deep into it, but it's just worth noting that a lot of options start to come on the table if there's any truth to this. If there's truth to them not having a lot of games to show, and if there's truth to this being a possible sign about next-gen hardware coming soon. Now, they could still reveal and release the hardware all next year, or they could reveal the hardware at the end of this year and release it in the first half of next year, which has kind of really become my current standing prediction, right? As somebody who's been predicting the 2022 to 23 timeline for the reveal of the console going back to 2020, right? When I was first kind of thinking that this might be how things line up. And if they're not showing us games like Metroid and Mario and Donkey Kong at E3 for the back half of this year for the current 2017 Switch, well, that means they probably just want the back half of 2023 to be open so that they can prepare for the eventual reveal of that and then start that new hype and marketing cycle. Here's our new hardware. Whatever that thing turns out to be, right? We know it could be a Switch 2, it could be a console, it could be something different. Whatever it turns out to be, if they don't have a big tentpole holiday game, I don't think it's impossible that Nintendo reveal, like I've been saying, that they would reveal new hardware like fall this year and maybe make their one big title like Pikmin 4 and then some other, reasonably like double A-sized game. And like they could release those while also showing that a new console is coming in the first half of 2024. And that's Nintendo just kind of letting things go. And they're like, the back half of 2023, we're willing to sacrifice because we don't have games ready. All the other games we're making, we want primed for the next thing. You guys, how long have I been saying this to you? Now, I don't want to get too excited because, again, it's not confirmed. It's only speculation. But it becomes half sad speculation because it means 2023 doesn't have a lot for the back half of the year, but also half exciting speculation because maybe it does mean that this is the first true sign of next-gen hardware coming soon and being revealed soon. I say it all the time. It's not a lock. We're just guessing. I've only been guessing, but it's just interesting. VGC is saying this. We don't even know if their sources are legitimate, but it's an interesting thing to read. It makes sense now that we know Nintendo and the other companies won't be at E3 this year, so it just gives us a lot to chew on. And like I said, it's partly sad, and losing E3 is very, very tragic. But when we think about the right here and now for Nintendo, it kind of gives us a glimmer of hope about new hardware sometime soon, so that's what it is.